For the record, if you could state your name, the company that you work for, the place where you're in right now, and how long you've been working there, that'll be great.
Yes. Okay, my name is Yuri Reimer. I'm the General Manager / Managing Director of Atlas Copco New Zealand. And I've been here for 3.5 years now.
And in New Zealand, how big is your company? How many people do you have in your company?
We got 69 people in the company here, spread over the 2 islands, North and South Islands.
And of that, how many people are in sales?
We got 14 sales engineers based in service and in equipment sales outside, let's say, hey, the outside sales. And then, of course, we have per division, and we have 1 back office salesperson in the office itself.
Fantastic. So it's good. So within your organization, so you represent all of Atlas Copco's businesses. So which means how many divisions within Atlas Copco do you represent?
We got 4 divisions. There are 2 divisions based for equipment. One is the, let's say, we call it the smaller equipment. The one is the bigger equipment. That's the easiest way to explain it. And then we, of course, have the service division, which captures everything. And then we have the medical / high pressure system.
Indeed. So now if we talk about the external sales, right? Can you tell me how does the sales function work in a company like Atlas Copco?
Yeah, it's a bit different between service and equipment sales, because equipment sales is basically new sales, where we just want our guys to visit customers. In the end, it's basic, but sales is basic. Don't get me wrong, if you like it or visit customers, establish that relationship, make sure you know their needs, make sure you know their problems, and then go from there into a solution selling, because that's exactly what we do.
Great.
From service on the other side, it doesn't really matter what brand it is. We can of course service every brand.
But the fact is that, do you actually have a sales force that only sells service proactively?
Yes.
Or do you expect your the service calls coming in and then you just do ad hoc service?
No. We sell service plan. So we have dedicated people just to sell, let's say, service. They can of course sell a service job, but what we want them to do is to sell service plan.
Okay, fantastic. So if that's the case, that sort of makes sense out there. Now, if you take a look at, if you describe your market typically, what is the market that you're operating in, or what kind of customers do you have there?
Well, it's a 99.9% replacement market. We don't have any new builds here in New Zealand. And then we describe it as per kilowatt range. So we got the smaller kilowatt range is below 30 kilowatts for a compressor, and the upper. So probably 90% is smaller, like the panel beaters that we have, the small repair shops that we have. And then the last 10% is the big stuff. Segmentation wise, we're massive in dairy. I think we got, I don't know, 150 million cows here in New Zealand. So dairy is the biggest. Other than that, logging industry. So we've got a heap of logging going on. And other than those 2 big ones, it is mainly small manufacturing.
Indeed. And if you try and take a look at the competition that you have, is it the competition that you have globally, or do you also have local competitors?
It's mainly global. It's a bit of a strange one in New Zealand. There are 3 big players in actually 4 big players in New Zealand, but 3 of those big players belong to Atlas Copco. So we got Atlas Copco, and then we have the brand portfolio, which is called Arger, which sells CP, which is part of Atlas Copco, and we have ECS, who sells Cicada Pneumatic, and Chicato, and that's also part of the Atlas Copco brand. So altogether, I think we have like 70% market share. And then there's one big one is General Compression with Compare, who sells a wee bit of the rest. It's a weird situation, but it's like how Atlas Copco works.
Absolutely. Now, if of the 14 people that you have as sales engineers right now, how many of them are being ones that you have hired yourself, or did you inherit all the 14 that are still working today?
I think out of the 14, I hired, not only personally myself, of course, but together with my business line managers, probably 8 of them are new.
Okay. And 8 are new to the world of business itself, or new to your company?
New to our company, not to sales, but new to our company.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
There is a different way of doing business, Diva, here in New Zealand compared to what I'm used to in the Netherlands and in Europe, because it's probably not nice to say, but they're 10 to 15 years behind.
Yeah.
Compared to Europe.
Yeah. In terms of that's a good point. So where do you recruit your salespeople from? So from competition, from customers, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's mainly from competition, because first of all, it's pretty tough to get someone used to selling capital goods.
Yeah.
So you end up at forklifts or printers. And it's also very hard to have someone, let's say, to teach someone compressed air technology.
Yeah.
It's not as much as the product itself, but it's the application.
Yeah.
And if we would only sell to dairy, then it's easy. Yeah. You just get your knowledge about dairy. Yeah. But we sell to the whole world basically. Yeah. Every segment is out there except for hospitality. So it's pretty tough to understand every application that compressed air is used in. And then we also have nitrogen and oxygen. So it's just, you need 3 to 5 years to be up and running to actually sell the compressors. So if we can get someone from the competition, easy, because that person is up and running in half a year. So
which good. So if, let's say, for example, you're not able to get from the competition, how do you train them? Because recruitment is all, so let's say competition is going to be hard. So if there's nothing from the competition, so where do you recruit them from?
We have our own learning link platform. So it's highly online at the moment. What we used to do is send them to Europe. So they go to the factory for 2-3 weeks and they get drilled in every little aspect. And then from that point onwards, it is keeping it up to date with online learning and on the job. So you send them with the service technicians, you send them away with the sales guys. It's a mix. Nowadays, there's no mix. It's just online and in the field, because we can't send them away.
So essentially, there's nothing like where you go to the local universities and try to recruit somebody new there.
No.
Okay. And have you at least you or your HR or learning and development managers tried to see if there is content and training being offered at the local universities there in sales?
No, it's on the agenda actually for this year. But at the moment, no. It's called the brand awareness for basically our brand here, which is probably good with all the technicians and let's say engineers that work at our factories. But at school, I don't think many people know Atlas Copco, to be honest.
Yeah. No, but indeed. So if you try and take a look at, now you talked about the fact that your sales process is mostly restricted to, what can I say, is not refurbishment, but replacement, right? So typically when that happens, so essentially, do you do any prospecting at all, or do you just respond to requests that come to you? You know what I mean?
Basically split in two. What I've learned over time is that the more qualified leads I can give to my sales engineers, the better they are, obviously. So we need to do that in the back office, because you don't want them to they still do it sometimes. But if you expect a very expensive guy just to knock doors and say, hi, I'm Yuri, and it's just too expensive nowadays. So that's on one side. On the other side, there is, of course, a huge install base that we can use with old machines, but also machines that are not really energy efficient anymore. So it's not waiting for someone to pick up the phone and say, hey, I need a compressor. Okay, fantastic. No, it's actually going probably 80% out there, just to make sure you plant that seed, saying, hey, by the time that you need a new machine, I'm the one to call.
And so which means that in those kind of situations, let's say, all the way from where you do your homework in terms of reaching out from your back office or from your marketing to do the prospecting, qualifying of the leads, all the way to where the salesperson goes, knocks on the door till you close the lead, how long does the sales cycle take?
Yeah, then you have to split it in those two divisions, smaller machines, bigger machines. Small machines can be from, let's say, a day up to a month.
Yeah.
Big machines can be from a month up to 2 years.
Oh, and for up to a month and things like that, do you increasingly do it through inside sales, or you know what I mean? That your salespeople are too important for them to be visiting them, so that it frees up the time to focus on the bigger sale?
Yeah, I did that in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
but we're not as sophisticated yet here in New Zealand. So yes, we will set it up eventually,
Yeah.
but we're not there yet.
Okay. Now, help me understand. So essentially, when the salespeople go in, does your company have a particular methodology it uses to train its salespeople? So I know that there's persuasive inquiry that you
Yeah,
use.
yeah, PI
So,
plus. Yeah.
right, is there anything else that you have in terms of sales methodology, tactics that you use to train your salespeople?
No, not really. We have a few external companies that train our sales guys basically on sales cycle.
Okay.
Whether that is a methodology, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But for me, it's sales, and I try to explain. I do trainings myself as well, or trainings. I try to
Yeah.
explain to them what they need to do, which is in the end bloody simple. You go in, you need something. Apparently you need something. I can provide it to you, and the only thing I need to make sure of is that you buy it from me. Okay.
Yeah.
So we need to ask as many questions as possible. I need to understand your problem, and I need to gain your trust, and then from there onwards,
Yeah.
it's easy. But not everyone understands that, but it is easy.
And do you tell your people that they have to spend quite some time in asking questions
Yes.
initially, or is it more about trying to make a pitch for why your product is the best?
No, ask the questions, please. It's not that they all do it, because apparently it is very tough to do that.
Yeah.
I still don't understand, but it's very tough to do that. And I try to explain to them, look, there's a customer sitting in front of you. He spends time and money on listening to you, but you're there
Yeah.
and you spend money as well. So just ask the question, because in the end you want to help him, obviously. So ask the question. How can you help someone if you don't know what's going on? So
Indeed.
ask questions and listen.
Fantastic. Now, the question I want to ask you before I go into more general questions is that, in your opinion, what does it take to be successful in sales in your company, but in your region?
Oh, that's a very good question, actually. You need to understand the culture here, and the culture is a laid-back culture.
Yeah.
So you start pushing, you're out.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think the better you are in listening,
Yeah.
the better, let's say, the more successful you will be in sales.
Sales, indeed. And any other thing that you would say, tell the new, or let's say, for example, soon you're a multinational company, you've been there for 3.5 years, so maybe you'll move back to another country soon. So your replacement, if he, she, or they are not from New Zealand, what other things would you say that they should be kind of insisting that the salespeople do? So one was not being pushy, one was being, of course, the idea is that one was being pushy, the other was to ask the right kind of questions. Anything else? Listening, yeah.
Listening it's indeed very, very important, and there's still a culture here. It's not that online stuff, but it's getting contact with your customers. So you have to build. It's built on relationships. So you have to build that relationship, and again, not being pushy. We have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea in New Zealand, and we keep in touch. That's how the actual sales works here.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I want to spend the last 5 to 6 minutes talking to you about some of the things that are happening specifically in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the opportunities that you see for sales in New Zealand?
Sales in general, I mean, to increase the business?
Increase the business in general, yes.
Or it's energy efficiency. Because they don't have any clue about energy efficiency here. They will put a fixed speed machine in, 100 kilowatt fixed speed machine in, without even thinking about energy.
Yeah.
We need to educate them based on energy. And the funny thing is, 80 to 90% of the energy produced in New Zealand is renewable energy.
Yeah.
So they do understand that it's important, but they don't care if they have to pay for it. It's weird. It's weird.
Indeed. I guess educating them is going to be another big challenge for you as well, right? In terms of educating them.
Yes.
Indeed. And what are some of the challenges that you face in sales in New Zealand?
The laid-back culture.
Yeah. Okay. So that is one thing.
It took me a year, Diva, to actually understand the laid-back culture. I'll give you one example, and then I'll leave you to. It was 2 weeks before Christmas. I'm used to 2 weeks before Christmas. It is. Come on, guys. It's almost Christmas. Here they said, "Oh, in 2 weeks it's Christmas. Let's just wind down."
Yeah.
It's like, no. it's yeah,
Indeed.
different.
No, but how does it? How was it to manage? Because I'm assuming that all of your salespeople are local New Zealanders, right? Kiwis, right? So,
No, we got and South Africans.
so
South Africans.
okay, sorry, but are the South Africans laid back as well, or are
Yeah,
they? Okay,
they're same thing. They adapt straight away like
they
that.
adapt straight away.
Yeah.
So, so essentially, what you're saying is that so for sales, so as a manager, was it more of a challenge for you coming in from the Netherlands, or for any sales manager, even if they're New Zealander and they've been there, that as a manager, it's going to be different and difficult leading a team? You know what I mean? Am I making sense
Yeah,
of
yeah,
you?
yeah, I know what you mean. No,
Yeah,
I think if you acquire a manager, if you hire a manager here that is used to the local culture,
yeah,
it is easier to manage. That
yeah,
doesn't mean the he will reach his growth that he
yeah,
wants to, compared to a European person. If you
yeah,
put a European person here, that person needs to adapt first to the
yeah,
culture of New Zealand, and then from that point onwards, he can start adapting. On the
yeah.
other hand, it's also that we are, and maybe it's a bit cocky to say, but we are more sophisticated in sales in Europe than we are in New Zealand. So
Yeah.
they would love to hear all your stories. They were like, oh wow, that's great. And how do we do that then? And
Yeah.
how do you pick up the call and do cold calling? Because they're not used to that. So it's a bit of two
Yeah.
best worlds. You know what I mean?
And I think I kind of understand the nice part of being there for holidays, but the difficult part of maybe having to be there as a European, especially also from Netherlands, Western Europe, being in a place like that for work. Huh? You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think that's the kind of thing that you do. Now, did you as a company, now not you as Yuri, as a Dutch expat there, but did you as a company do anything to adapt to the COVID pandemic specifically, or maybe not so much?
In New Zealand or globally?
New Zealand, not
New
globally. No,
Zealand.
yeah,
Well, the thing is, we of course went in lockdown last year in April, March.
yeah,
After that, there were just a few small lockdowns, and that was it.
yeah,
So we don't have any COVID in the community here. So for us, it's business as usual.
yeah. Really?
Um, what we do is online meetings,
Yeah,
which is pretty more advanced than it used to be.
yeah,
There's more one-on-one, there's more team conversations. We used to think that it needs to be face-to-face. Well,
yeah,
that's history now. We can
yeah,
easily do that online.
yeah,
And of course, there's travel restrictions internationally.
yeah.
So like I said, we went live with SAP on the 8th of March,
Yes.
and all training and all validation happened online,
Yeah,
where we used to travel for that, and now it happened online. And I think it's a big learning because the launch was successful. So you can actually do it. And
yeah,
altogether, I think we saved $150,000 of travel.
yeah. Indeed. Now, actually, the last question is that you talked about some of the challenges that you faced as an expat from a different kind of culture in New Zealand, only for sales. I'm only talking about for
Yeah,
sales, right?
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
where do you think the sales excels in New Zealand? You know what I mean? Are there some areas that they're really good at?
Oh,
Oh man.
oh man, where do we? Well, the funny thing is,
Yeah.
and if you visit your customer and if you listen to your customer, you're going to sell more.
Yeah.
It's pretty basic,
Yeah.
but that's exactly what it is. That's how we are growing. We grew 20% in sales last year in a COVID year. Why? Because I kept pushing and pushing and pushing that we have to visit those customers.
Yeah.
You don't have to sell anything. You just have to visit the customer and establish that relationship. That's how we grew the business. That's how we excel here in New Zealand. And of
Yeah.
course, it helps when you're the biggest brand, and it helps when you're
Yeah.
a good brand. You know, it's easier here in New Zealand because people still think that the bigger the brand is, the better you are, which doesn't
Yeah.
have to be like that.
Yeah.
And another thing that helped us was price management.
Yeah.
And price management doesn't mean you have to lower your price. People always
Yeah.
think, oh, you have to lower the price. No, 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 no. You have to make sure that you're aligned with the market. We got different range of products. And there was a big mix up in pricing. So we have to do the price alignment. That helped us as well. But it's back to basics here.
Yeah.
Just visit the customers, ask the questions, listen to your customers, and then if applicable, come up with a proposal.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions I have for you, Yuri. Thank you. I'm just going to stop recording. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I am talking to Joel. Joel, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. The purpose of today's call is to actually understand how sales gets done in the Philippines. So essentially, because of the fact that you are from the Philippines yourself, you were educated there, you also had a global career in sales, but we want to get your view on your time in the Philippines as well. So for the background, what is your first degree in?
No, I was a mechanical engineer.
Indeed.
Graduated in one of the oldest university in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were in mostly I was in a mechanical engineer. I started on the college by the degree of industrial engineering.
Yeah.
And then I found out that there's no board exam there.
Yeah.
I mean, for you to be an engineer inside the Philippines, you need to have a board exam by the government. Only 30% who applied always gets that engineering degree. And since industrial engineering doesn't have any, so I went to mechanical, and then hopefully I got that engineering. Passed the board exam and engineer in the Philippines. So that's the story of it. Yeah.
So if you take a look at the fact that when you were in the mechanical engineering program, did they have any kind of commercial classes to kind of even prepare you for in case you ended up with a job as a sales engineer, for example? Anything at the university level?
Yes, indirectly there is.
Yeah.
And that's why I was saying to you indirectly, I'll explain it as we go on. Because we are being taught on how to, in an engineering world, on how to discuss things with contractors, how to do a plan, or how do you execute a project. And based on those particular information, then that actually becomes one of the recipes on having some sales approach.
Yeah.
Because those are the things that we will be discussing on the commercial level, right?
Fantastic.
So when will you have the meeting? What will be the execution of the project? What's the scope of the meeting? Which is basically the same thing as a commercial sales that you will have, and how to deal with people. Those are the earliest times that we have, let's say, an indirect training on how to do a project, which in turn will be a sales.
Fantastic.
Of course, I went to get a job in Toyota and Atlas Copco, and then that becomes like a different juggernaut of information of sales. So
fantastic. No, but that's interesting, right? Because you say it is kind of assumed that these are the basic sales skills, but when you were actually in the class, there was no specific mention that these are commercial skills we're giving. We're telling you how to be successful in your mechanical engineering job that you might get, but not specifically saying you might be successful in a commercial role afterwards, correct?
Oh yeah, that's true. And I guess most of every one of my colleagues who have been mechanical engineer either ended up really in the plant, which is okay, and that's their career path. But a lot of us comes to commercial terms of selling equipments or machines. So
indeed. But is that the same? So later on, so you began as a salesperson, but you've also had teams that have reported to you as well, right?
Oh yeah.
So indeed, from that perspective, so when you went into, did you ever recruit people fresh from the university in your jobs to go into a commercial role? You know what I mean?
There is.
Yeah.
Well, let's say first, maybe. Let me bring you back first. The very first thing that I've learned on how to deal with customers when actually I work part-time in McDonald's. So they have a really good training system there on how to greet customer and things like that. So adding them up in a way when after getting a degree, being a mechanical engineer, going to Toyota in the Philippines, and then summing them up. And then having a team of distributors, and then going to Atlas Copco, having a team of sales guys, then you will understand on the complexities that shall I hire a new guy or shall I hire an experienced guy? So I mean, hiring first of all, when you think that particular business needs to be developed, and you need to mold it into a
Mm.
certain way that it needs to
Mm.
perform, and you have
Yeah.
time to do it, by all means hire a freshman that
Yeah.
has that particular
Yeah.
instinct of what they want to accomplish
Yeah.
in sales, in a background of commercial or
Yeah.
technical background. But in the end, that there are times that you need to hire people because there's a vacancy, a
Mm.
vacuum has been put in place because of somebody's leaving
Yeah.
the company, and you need to have somebody that will work as quick as possible. Then, of course, then you need to check if you can hire a much
Yeah.
more experienced guy or lady, of course.
Got it. That's interesting. So when you say you want to, let's say you have the opportunity to recruit somebody fresh from university, right?
Mhm.
And when that happens, do you actually look for whether the student has had any kind of commercial not training, but any kind of commercial classes or sales classes in the university? Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that
Mhm, mhm.
do you find that since your time that there's more and more focus on at least giving basic sales skills
Mhm,
to graduates, and does not have to be in engineering,
mhm.
from your
Oh yeah.
experience as a
Mhm.
yeah. So do you see that sales is becoming part of the education in some degrees, or at least in some universities, to train young students on these selling skills?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
if you think about it, nobody has been studying that they're going to sell compressors, right, in their college. So,
Yeah.
or they're going to sell a Toyota, for
Yeah.
example. So every time that you need to see, it's a blank canvas that you see that is he or she is in the right profile.
Yeah.
First, people that they are able to discuss with people. You will see it in the interview. And then able to handle a few things, not complicated problems, but a few things that make sense.
Mm.
That's the approach. Or maybe that might be a reverse of it. That doesn't make sense, but
Mm.
they have the reason why.
Yeah.
With
Okay.
respect to that, why their reasons are different. Those are the things that you try to look at, and especially here in the U.S. And I can tell you now, in the Middle East, everyone is an expat there. Everyone is coming in to be in the Middle East.
Mm.
So you have a pool of talent of engineers, right?
Mm.
And for you to do a sales of a mechanical sales, a machine sales,
Mm.
it will be good to have mechanical engineering so that it can be, properly explained also to the one who are buying are also expats
Mm.
in the Middle East that are all engineers.
Mm.
So you have plenty of engineers there. But in the US, it's not really that much because some of the engineers here are really used in a term of engineering
Mm.
degree. When you have some sales, there might be available, but it's not really that abundant. So
Mm.
sales are coming in from, the not an engineering degree. Not it's really
Yeah. Yeah.
needed for an engineering degree. But then again, you can get other degrees, especially on dealing things with sales in equipment, even though everything has been mechanically inclined to technology. But we have a lot of sales men and women in different types of, college
Yeah.
degrees.
Fantastic. Now, if you take a look at training and training
Mhm,
your people on sales skills, right, in the Philippines,
mhm, mhm,
where do people get trained on? Now, I'm talking not about fresh people, but let's say you want
mhm,
to train your salespeople, you want to train your sales managers.
mhm.
Is the focus on looking at universities as a place to train even salespeople and sales managers, or it depends upon the company and the company's responsibility there? I'm now talking about
Yeah,
executive education and things like that.
check.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll focus first on the 90s
Yeah.
where the time
Yes.
that I
Yeah.
graduated. And now everybody's going to guess my age. But anyways, so in the 90s itself, more or less the education is very formal, whatever your
Yeah.
course is. And the degree of let's say salesmanship
Yeah.
that you get is normally offered by the company who is
Yes.
offering you the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
As I mentioned, McDonald's, I got the understanding of how to interact, make a salesmanship.
Yeah.
When they suggest to you, do you want a sundae or after you're
Yeah.
ordering a meal? That's
Yeah.
actually part of a salesmanship
Yeah.
being trained by McDonald's or any other food chain.
Yeah.
So the company in the Philippines have this particularly basic training in order for them to get on board new employees on how to sell the company's services and products, and of course enhance customer relationship. At the same time, with the car manufacturer Toyota, when I went in, they have their own system of training as well, which you carry and then discuss. They're all similar. And then when I go to my current company, which is Atlas Copco in the Philippines, which I started there, they also have their own, training program of training. Now, the difference is that some of the companies have their own internal ones, which are very strong ones, like for example, Toyota, a very big company, and McDonald's, very big company, that they have their own, training of how to do this in different type of salesmanship, discussing with customers. But there are times that they also hire third party in order for you to enhance your skills. So in a way, some of my company that I've joined need to go with a third party in order to enhance your skills. Check if you can do, persuasion. And then persuasive training, spin training, and all this stuff. And sometimes they have their own in-house training as well. So in a combination of those are the trainings that I get in the Philippines. Not so much, to be honest, in school. But you know what? I actually kind of asked my daughter, her, the millennials, on how they are being trained with other informations other than their course. And you know that here right now in the Philippines, when she had the opportunity to be a first year high school, so she was first year high school in the Philippines, and the rest is now she's here in the US. So, and she's graduating now on high school. So when she was in the Philippines, they have even marketing and sales as part of their curricular, part of their subject. And I was like, hey, I was just getting this training when I was already in corporate, and now you are having it in your school. So there's a really big change.
Shift, indeed. That's interesting.
On the education itself.
Indeed, that's good. Now, I know that your career has taken you to many parts of the world and everything else. But if you try and take a look at, are you still in touch with some of your colleagues back in the Philippines about how sales is changing in general, in terms of even customers? Are they becoming more knowledgeable? Is it becoming more complex? You see, I mean, what are the implications of digital? Do you keep touch with what's happening in the world of sales in the Philippines right now?
Oh yeah. So, well, I was just curious of, got some chance to get a talk with with some of my colleagues who are still back in the Philippines doing the job that, leading sales. And actually, most of the trainings that they have done are almost the same as what, simulation of sales under this commercial aspect, and then understanding the technical aspect, the soft skill, the hard, the hard skills and things like that, and then combining them. Simulations is always part of sales training in a corporate world, but I find that now being done with my daughter. My daughter was saying that Daddy, we are having some sales simulations or marketing simulations in this way. But I think based on the requirement that we are having now, and the way, especially the way we are currently now, with everyone is not really doing a face-to-face sale, more or less that these subjects are becoming really being asked by everyone. So I guess if this kind of demand is very high at the end of, let's say, post-school graduates, and then they are offering it now to, in a college curriculum on how to deal with this and things like that. But that's the only thing that I know at the moment on the things that was, being done and still being done in the sales process itself.
Perfect. Well, that's all the time that we have. And I want to ask you, thank you so much, Joel, for sharing your insights about things in the Philippines, not just from the viewpoint of where you were before when you started your career, but also how things have evolved since then, and how things like what we talk about, our best practices, are happening in the Philippines.
Maybe if I can add one more, Dev,
sure, absolutely.
The main thing that in a way, maybe it's directed or indirectly affecting the sales training itself is how do you present yourself on a social media?
Yeah.
And this is
Right.
where I think most of the sales are getting into
Yeah.
it. That how do we make a future influencer? Because
Yeah.
the future influencer is actually it's a salesmanship.
Indeed.
You want to sell first your own brand that people would
Yeah.
watch your video, and then based on what you have in your video, that you can be an influencer of different products.
Indeed.
So those are the things that I think trending that are really very, let's say, interesting to understand. Plus all the algorithmic of sales and how do you use it, how do you click all the things in your web, how do you design it. In a way, now it's part of sales itself. Before it was just like, how do you probe? How
Yeah.
do you get the phone call? How do you,
Yeah.
now it's even how do you make sure that you have your, the subject of your email, what will be
Yeah.
your subject so that they will click on your link, that they will click on your, you will get the likes and things like that. So now it's more on a lot of digital things. It's not just about probing. So
Fantastic. And now, not just for the Philippines, but do you think that in your organization that there's more focus on developing these skill sets in your salespeople? Because there's one
absolutely.
thing, because the young people, it's interesting, you talked about your daughter going through school and they actually start getting it already much earlier, but
Mhm.
getting your existing salespeople who are used to a particular way of working into this new way of digital selling, social media presence, is
Mhm.
that something that organizations are now taking steps to try and develop as skill sets in the salespeople as well?
I think so. But
Yeah.
if you know that if you have a sales guy that is like 50 years old, 40 years old, that tried and tested that they have
Yeah.
this already, it takes a bit of a time because they're still successful in what they're doing. And of
Indeed.
course, some of their customers are also on their, at our current age levels and things like that. So it still works and things like that. But the main thing is that when does the old style of salesmanship stops
And
or try to diminish by the new types of things now? Before, you just need to make sure that you take care of the customer, which is still, of course,
yeah.
don't get me wrong, it's still there. Just make sure that the customer is there. You greet them very quickly. You act on it very quickly, and all those things, probing techniques, qualifying techniques, and all those stuff. Now there's even more. As I mentioned, there's even more parameters. How do you send an email? How do
Yeah.
you make them bring it in? How do you sell to from a let's say from an X
Yeah.
generation X to the generation Z? How
Yeah.
do you reach it? So there's a lot of things, and it takes time for people to get it. But of course, if the company is really trying to make sure that our sales guys can relate to any type of purchaser, may it be the new purchaser, the old purchasers, then that should be the goal. And it's my goal also as a sales manager to make sure that everyone is a bridge. We don't isolate people that okay,
You're
here's a
not doing
millennial
it.
buyer. Let's get a millennial sales guy. I mean, that will not work because
Yeah.
yeah.
Indeed. Perfect.
So,
Well, Joel, this was very, very insightful. Thank you so much. And again, once we have compiled all the things, we'll share some of the findings with you as well.
sure. Thank you very much for
All right. I'm here talking to JC, and essentially tell me about what is your current role in your company? What kind of normal tasks do you do as a sales director?
Yeah, so I'm looking after the acquisitions team as well as the account managers. So those are our existing clients, as well as one onboarding specialist. That means that we cover full sales cycle. So we go from acquiring the customer, onboarding the customer, to managing the existing relationship in the months and years after.
Fantastic. And can you give a description of your market? What is it that your products and services do for customers?
Yeah, we sell marketing solutions,
Okay.
typically for direct to consumer brands, which means our ICP would be a web shop that is being hosted on a Shopify platform, for example.
Ah, great. Okay.
In terms of number of employees, you're looking at like 2 to 20 employees on average, with a business with a turnover of about 1 to 10 million. That's like ICP.
That's what you're looking at in terms of that. And who are your competitors? Who are roughly your competitors? Are they local? Are they global? You know what I mean? Do they compete in the same space as you do?
Yeah, tech industry. So it's global. Majority are American companies. Main competitors are obviously Google and a Facebook, as well as companies such as Criteo, such as Mailchimp, Klaviyo. So yeah, very much the tech firms out there.
Fantastic. So now you said that you manage your own whole APAC with around 5 people, right? And you said 5 people of the 5 sales and then 1 onboarding. Is that correct? Or that 5 includes the onboarding specialist too?
Yeah. So it's 2 acquisition, 2 account managers, and 1 in onboarding.
Fantastic, right? 1 in onboarding. Right? Now, these people, the 5, did you inherit them or did you go about recruiting them?
Half. Half were inherited, the rest were recruited.
Yeah. Tell me about the people that you recruited yourself. Huh? So the people that you recruited, where did you recruit them from?
Competing tech firms.
Okay. So it's not that you went to universities and looked at fresh hires. You mostly wanted people with experience.
Yes, we do. I have been running in the company previously a different sales team, which was a sales development team, so the SDR roles or BDR roles. That's where we typically would hire straight out of college. That is kind of our bench program almost, where we train them for about 12 months. And if they're successful through that, they can start a junior sales role. But in this specific entity here in APAC, we don't work with SDRs because of the scale of the business. And as a result, I don't hire straight out of college.
Fantastic. And so the people that if things were to change and you wanted to recruit fresh out of college in Australia, would you be able to find universities that train the people on sales? Or are you even aware of such kind of universities in Australia doing that?
It's a good question. I haven't looked into it, so I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I guess if you were to do it, where would be the first place you would look for recruiting salespeople if you had to recruit fresh from university?
Friends with someone from UNSW, for example.
Yeah, exactly. University of North. Yeah, is it University of New South Wales? I guess. Yeah. So that's what it. So essentially, what you're saying is that then you might want to do it, but then you have to start from scratch. But you're not even sure if they're being trained on sales. So would you look for if there is absence of sales training for youngsters? Would you then recruit people who are not trained in the basics of sales, and then you would have to train them?
Yeah, I look at 2 criteria, or I look at experience in sales, or I look at experience in marketing, and it can be either or. You do see often in market that people do have internships, and based on those internships, they might already have some type of background, marketing or sales. But you try to look for some indicator that's going to say, I know how to have a conversation with someone.
Great. So one of the things you mentioned was that you recruit people from, you recruit sales executives from other firms and stuff like that. And then even when you get them, how much time do you spend training them? And when you train them, I want you to talk about how long is the onboarding and how long does the actual training, if you want to differentiate between both those two.
Yeah. Actual onboarding is going to take around 2 to 4 weeks. The first 2 weeks are full-on training. It's just training. Then 2 weeks after is a combination of shadowing existing reps as well as still a little bit of training.
Yeah.
So that's for the first month. And then depending on the tenure of the, the experience level of the rep, I would say it takes at least 3 months for them to be medium ramped. And then after 6 months, 5-6 months, we expect them to be on a full quota, as we say.
Fantastic. And I know that your organization is headquartered in another part of the world, correct?
Yeah.
And is the policies regarding hiring, onboarding, training that you do in Australia the same as what is laid out in headquarters, or do you have sufficient, what can I say, independence to do what you think is best in your region?
We do what we think is best.
Okay.
That being said, it's a global organization that's large enough to have specific processes that need to be followed.
Yeah.
But you localize your approach a bit. Yeah.
Fantastic. The next question actually is take us through your typical sales process, right? So how do you prospect? How do you qualify your leads, and how do you try and close the deals?
Yeah. First split would happen through inbound, outbound. Majority is on inbound. So the client signs up for an account with us. Once that they have signed up, they go through an automated qualification process. Qualification process determines is the size of the company good enough? Is the estimated revenue good enough? Those are estimates, data points. The data points give us an indication. Based on that, a sales rep is going to re-qualify.
Got it.
Are the data points accurate? Sometimes you know that based on what you can see. Sometimes you need a call with the client. There are additional qualification questions being asked on the phone. And once that those are ticked off, then we proceed with a conversation with a client.
Fantastic.
Then we have the outbound section. For outbound, the prospecting is taking place as well based on certain data points, criteria of clients that we think are suitable. There we are a bit more strict because it's outbound instead of inbound. Inbound, they are coming in anyway, so we put the radius a little bit wider. On the other hand, with outbound, we're a bit more strict. We reach out, same process, call, qualifying on the call, and from there we proceed.
Fantastic. So typically starting to end, how long does a sales cycle take?
It's going to be between 1 and 2 months if it's our ICP. If it's our ICP, otherwise it can take a little bit longer. Sometimes we onboard clients that are outside of that because they're particularly interesting.
You mentioned ICP. What does ICP mean?
Ideal customer profile. Sorry.
Great. That's fine because Christoph, JC, you and I go back. ICP meant in-company projects when I knew you. So so that's fine. It's ideal customer profile. No, that's fine. So tell me, when you train your people, do you have standard sales methodologies and tactics that you use for your inbound folks, and a specific sales methodology that you use for your outbound team?
Yes. Because of the scale of the team here, the methodology is the same, and we adjust a little bit as we go. But yes, we do have a standardized approach for sales methodology.
Yeah. And do you also let your salespeople, let's say, for example,
I'm just going to close the window for a second.
Sure.
Gardener is passing by with some machines.
Yeah, no. So, by the way, I'm sorry that I'm also looking at the list of questions. So don't worry about it.
Okay, please proceed.
Yeah. So, JC, so essentially, so what I was asking was that, wait, hold on. So when you talk about the methodology, you said it's more or less the same, right? But let's say, for example, when you're dealing with a customer who is a returning customer, I mean, they were a customer, then for some reason they went off and they came back. At that point in time, do you make a difference in your sales methodology depending upon the kind of lead? So returning customers would be different. It's a different kind of methodology. Whereas if it's a customer that you want to poach, a prospect you want to poach from your competition, you know what I mean? So your sales tactics will be quite different based on also the situation. Is that something that you do and train your people on?
Yes, but we would train them through the full process. So we have, I'll save you from the whole sales methodology, but it's considered as a like the analogy is through a bow tie, and we kind of still go through the whole process. But fair to say that for NBS, you're going to be more on the left side of the bow tie with account management. So AM, you're going to be more on the right-hand side. And then in the end, like it's only theory, right? A lot of the training is taking place on the job by joining calls, and that's where a lot of the adjustments happen.
Fantastic. And if you were to try and look at how long do you spend as a director on coaching your team, how much time do you think you spend in a week or in a day? If I were to ask you, what percentage of your time do you spend coaching a sales team? What would your answer be?
I would say about 30-40% of the time. It has to be huge, because in our business, our key asset are people.
Let me ask you, indeed, is this 30-40 people? Because you've also managed a team before in another part of the world. Huh? Yeah. So do you feel, by the way, are all the people in your team Australian, as in, native Australians, or you also have people from different cultures in the team?
Very diverse. We're 6 people, including myself, 5 different nationalities, few different ethnicities. So it's
it's very interesting. So essentially what you have is that a very kind of a melting pot, even in your own sales team. So if I were to ask you, because you manage a team, what are certain things that are important for salespeople to be successful in your line of business?
Their intrinsic motivation is going to be, in my opinion, key in sales. Why are you doing the job? What are your motivators? For some people in sales, for a lot of them, it's money. But for a lot of people in sales jobs, money is not the main driver. It can be client relationships. It can be growing the customer, doing right by the customer and being part of that process. So it's just trying to understand that per person and manage them accordingly. Yeah.
Okay, good. In the interest of time, I'm going to restrict myself to 2 questions. One is, in your opinion, what makes selling in Australia different from your experiences in other parts of the world?
It is more casual.
Yeah.
It is more casual, and it is a little bit more direct, almost.
Okay.
Yes.
What do you mean direct? That is, you can be bluntly honest?
Yes, you can be quite honest. It's almost the same within Europe. I sold a lot previously into the Dutch market. With Dutch people, it's an enormous difference with selling into the Belgian market. For Australia, you do notice that people are a little bit more relaxed, I feel. That being said, trust plays a huge component in here. I've noticed we have relationships with historical clients that have been with us for a really long time, and those relationships are very tight. Reason being, Australia, you have 5 main cities. The country is as large as the US, but it only has 25 million inhabitants. So the industry is not very big. So as a result, you want to ensure that the relationships you do have are good relationships, because you'll meet them again.
Yeah, no, that's good. And do you think there's a difference between how you sell in Australia as against New Zealand, even though they're neighbors? Just like Belgium and Holland are so different.
Good question. I would say I'm almost going to skip that one because the majority of our customers are Australian. Like we do have a few, like, and then we do a bit of outbound in New Zealand, but I'm going to make the split 90-10.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm going to skip that one.
So I know that you have to go in 2 minutes. So any final thoughts about what do you want to say about what you've learned about selling in Australia that you think people from around the world would be interested to know, apart from maybe they're laid back, but to the point? Anything else?
No, I think like apart from that, I might add something for in our second session. It's not all that different. It's previous job was in Ireland, and the type of engagements that you had there were quite similar. The one difference that you see here is there's a lot more face to face. But that is because it's like, it's Sydney. People are very close to each other. Everyone is based in or Sydney or Melbourne, and those are kind of the two essential cities. You might have Brisbane a little bit as well. But if you have the trust of someone, they'll introduce you to their friends in the industry, etc. So I feel like that's quite important. But apart from that, it's not too different compared to Europe, I'd say. Yeah.
Great. Well, JC, thank you so much for your time. And let me begin with my first question, correct? The first question I have is that in your current role, you say that you are a marketing manager, but do you also have a sales role as part of this role?
I'm not a marketing manager. I'm a market manager. So the market manager, in the definition, in our definition, is a sales manager or a salesperson here. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So what is it that you do on a daily basis in terms of your normal routines?
My normal routines would be to talk to customers and about their orders, and to see and to review their order pattern, their forecast, and typically what the normal sales process would do. So to visit them, well, if traveling is allowed, but it's not possible now. But hopefully not too long later, I can visit them. Yeah. And also in terms of like collection, payment and all these things. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. So essentially listen to customers, fulfill their requirements, take orders, maybe even collect payments. That's something that you do as well. But do you also have a role of, do you also manage a team, or are you the only market manager for your region?
It's an individual contributor role.
Okay.
Yeah. But I have an internal sales, it's more like a customer service personnel. Yeah. But he's not based in Southeast Asia. He's based in India.
India, okay. India. So if you try and take a look at your market, so tell us a little bit more about, I know that in a business, in your company, you have many business units, right? So do you represent all the business units, or do you represent only specific business units in your region?
Just Backup Fiber Technologies division.
Okay, only your division. So that's pretty much correct. That's great. So if I were to ask, how many salespeople do you have in your division overall across the world? Any idea, rough idea?
I think it would be around 10. Yeah.
Around 10. Okay.
Yeah, plus minus. Yeah.
Now, if I were to ask you, so you say you are in a specific business group, right? So if you were to tell me about your market, who are the typical kind of customers that you see?
We in fact under Backup Fiber Technologies, we have like 4 divisions, different divisions. We have filtration, we have conductive solutions, we have micro cables, and we have heat resistant textiles. These 4 divisions. So I actually service the customers in all 4 divisions. Yeah. In many other markets, in many other regions, we have market managers specific to a segment. So because Southeast Asia is quite small in terms of business volume as of now, so I'm actually handling all the segments. So we have filtration customers, the heat resistant textile, mainly automotive glass customers, and conductive solutions, textiles, micro cables, RFID, automotive heat seating customers. Those are the people that we are talking about.
That's great. So if you try and take a look at the competitors, do you actually have one competitor serving all the 4 segments that you go after, or you know what I mean? Or do you have different competitors for every segment?
Different competitors for every segment, because all these segments are very diverse and very different.
Indeed.
It is a different market. Yeah.
So which means that it must be very, very hard for you, especially because you have so many different segments. Do you have the customers in each of these segments? Do they have the same requirements, or do they have complex, different requirements across segments?
Different, totally different. Yeah.
Wow. So which means that you have different segments of customers with different needs and different competitors. So which means that if I were to ask you, is there a lot of training that is provided to you in order for you to be successful?
Oh, indeed, there are trainings being conducted, especially in the first month or so. I was being trained by application managers, the global segment managers. They tell me about the market, the products. But because I'm actually pretty new in this industry, in all the segments, so it took me a while to actually get a good grasp of the market, the industry. But I'm slowly getting traction, on the job.
Indeed. Yeah. Now, does your company have a history of recruiting young salespeople, or do they only recruit people with experience? So you said you've been with Baycard for 3+ years, right? But when you were, does your company have a history of recruiting people straight from university and training them?
If for sales, I think I think those that we recruited are those with certain years of experience. Not really fresh.
No, that's fine. But now, if I were to ask you, so when you get for yourself, when you were recruited into your company, the onboarding process for you, right? So you had said you had a lot of technical training, but do you also have sales-related training to help you understand how to sell in your company's philosophy?
Fortunately for me, when I actually came on board in BFT, they just started the BCE program. So there's more sort of like a kind of a commercial, training along, with all the other technical trainings.
Indeed. So the BCE would stand for your company name B, Commercial Excellence, CE.
Correct.
So now help me understand your typical sales process. So typically when you say, because you're a market manager I know a little bit about your business, that a lot of times your customers might not even know what they're looking for, correct? So tell me, how do you prospect for customers? Where do you look for customers? Do you do qualification, saying, is this the right customer to go talk to? Tell me a little bit more about how you do this.
Indeed, when we actually have, it depends on whether it's an existing customers or totally new customers. We are talking about the new prospect.
Indeed.
So we're going to, have some conversation with them, to listen to them and to understand their background and their requirement. And there's a lot of communication to and fro about what their needs, especially on the technical parts, because we are dealing with technical products, industrial technical product. So there's a lot of to and fro. You to identify which product or solution they're actually looking for, and what will be the match from Baycard.
Great. Now, if you try and take a look at the prospecting part, because you said you have a conversation with the customers, right? But that assumes, or with the prospects, but that assumes that you already know a prospect, or a prospect has reached out to you. But what happens? Do you do cold calling at all? That is, you go call on customers or send them emails or use social media to try and reach out to prospects who have not contacted you?
Oh, yeah, we do. I do.
You do as well. Is it something that you do as well? What percentage of your time do you do that?
As of now, because I'm new, and also we are new in this region, so there's a lot of opportunities. So what I do as of now is is only like 20 to 30% if I just give a rough estimation, but I like to increase that to at least above 50%. Yeah,
Indeed. So
in the next few months. Yeah.
So which means that since you're the only person, would you say that a lot of your time is spent mostly answering questions from customers or prospects?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if tell me, understand how long, let's say for example, you have a new customer, right? So from the time you start talking to them till you may end up. So think about the last new customer that you landed. How long does a typical sales cycle time take?
Well, if I think about the last one, I think it lasts between like 1 to 1.5 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 to 1.5 months. Is that normal? How long does it take? Let's say you go to an existing customer, but with the existing customer, it's a new project. So it's an existing customer, but it's a new project for the customer. So does it take the same 1.5 months, or does it take shorter if it's with an existing customer, even though it's a new project?
Okay. It depends on the complexity of the new project.
Okay.
If it's not that complex, I think you can settle it within 2 weeks, I think. But if it's more complex, it could be more than 1.5 months or even a few months going down the road. Yeah.
Okay. And are your customers predominantly local customers or multinationals which have set up their production facility in Southeast Asia?
Multinational. Set up in Southeast Asia. Yeah, because products not cheap,
Yeah.
Mostly will be MNCs, operating in this region.
But that's interesting, Greg. So do you actually also have in your specific product market, do you actually have local competitors who are low cost?
Local competitors who are low cost. Yes.
Yeah, you do. And are they equally competitive? You know what I mean? Or they are only competitive in terms of price, but not in terms of value that they give?
Well, it depends on the region, but if you're talking about HRT, we have one competitor from Taiwan. If you're talking, local, like quite near. So King's Battle. So they have similar quality with lower pricing.
Yeah, similar quality, lower. Okay.
Yeah, but for other segments, you have a competitor from China. It's very common for this region to have suppliers from China, from competitors from China. Yeah.
Indeed. So help me understand. So essentially, if you have these kind of competitors coming from everywhere and they are not as expensive as a European manufacturer in Asia, so how does your typical sales call look like? How do you convince your people, your customers, to buy? Do you actually do this by asking more questions to make your customers realize what problems they have? Or do you maybe teach your customers by saying, hey, this is what you might have a cheaper player, but here is what you should be looking for. You know what I mean? Like almost teaching the customer. So how do you typically sell? What makes you most successful?
Yeah, indeed, it's true. I'll try to understand the need behind the need of the customer, because most customers say, "Oh, give me cheap products, give me cheaper." That's the typical thing that they say. But besides the point, what do they actually need? How can I solve your problem? So that's very important. So the conversation will revolve around that. So when the conversation actually float out to other points that are pull them back, say, oh, come back, see what do you actually need, things like that. So there's a lot of to and fro about it.
So which means that you say that you do a combination of asking questions to the customer and maybe trying to also educate the customer to say why your products are better than the competition, even though the competition is cheaper. Am I understanding this correct?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So Greg, if I were to ask you, what are the important things for you to be successful in sales? So just tell me 3 or 4 things. What is important for you to be successful in sales?
I think for me is to have a strong support from the organization. Marketing support, for instance, to actually map the current market, the landscape, the competitive landscape. Because this region is also new to BFT. There wasn't any market manager before. So I'm the first one because this is a growing region. The BFT actually identified that it needs someone to be based. So I'm actually the first market manager for this region. So there's a lot of unknowns, around this region. So I need help in that to map out the market. And also to prioritize which segment to go into, because I handle everything, and in a region of 10 countries, 10 languages, 10 currencies. It's not like an EU, it's not like that, This is a region of very high diversity. So we need to focus on which countries and which segments to go into. So
that's very
I need help. Yeah, I need help in that. Yeah.
Wow. So essentially, do you then, if you take a look at how you try to sell, so it's not that you only take care of the Malaysia market, you take care of the Southeast Asia market, or you only take care of Malaysia now?
Southeast Asia.
Southeast
The
Asia.
whole of Asia.
Which means that then, help me understand. So each country that you go to is going to have its own set of different factors. You said it, right? So 10 different countries, 10 different maybe languages, 10 different laws, 10 different currencies, 10 different political systems. So tell me, what is some of the ways by which you tackle this complexity?
We try to prioritize for one. We need to prioritize, because we can't I can't spread myself too thin and too wide. So we need to prioritize which having the potential to move forward with, which customers move forward. And also we are thinking of whether, there's a value in appointing agents or distributors in certain markets. So because if I can't go there, maybe there's a way to do that. But it's very common in this region, to appoint local agents where they have more connections, relationship with the local end users. We might be thinking about.
Very nice. So if you were to use these kind of agents and stuff like that, would it be your responsibility to appoint agents and manage them as well, or will you get support from your organization to do that?
I believe primarily will be myself, with the support of the organization, of course.
Indeed. So Greg, my next question is that how has, I'll just have two more questions. I'm sorry about that. So
sure.
how has COVID adapted? How has COVID changed the way you sell today in your market?
Very much, because without COVID, I'll be mostly on the road, or I would say traveling by now. I think more than 50% of my time will be like visiting customers. But because of COVID, I couldn't do that now. So I always have that. I try to communicate. Well, I have to communicate online, through emails, through calls, even telephone calls, this and that. So there's only so much I can do, especially for someone like me who don't know them at all. So in order to build that relationship is pretty challenging. Unless I've already known them for years, for some time. So move that to online, that is not so much of a problem. But to start everything afresh online, that's a bit of my challenge.
Oh, good. So last question for you. So what should the whole world know? World that is so, let's say, for example, focused on the US or North America, South America, Europe and everything else. What are some aspects unique to your region that makes selling so interesting and challenging?
Yeah. One of the points that I see is that being a multinational, because we always talk about our total cost of ownership, TOC. That actually drives the discussion away purely on pricing. So I do agree with that, because I come from a multinational background. I do see the value in it, but not so much on the local players, especially local homegrown companies, small and medium industry. When you talk about TOC with them, they don't see a value in that. So it actually takes a long time for them to realize, TOC has a value, to drive away the price. It's always price, for local customers, and especially in this region whereby their customers or who are of ethnic Chinese, they're local Chinese people, not from China, but they are technically Chinese. So they are very cost conscious, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of like a challenge to actually break through in this layer of customer. So the question is whether we want to like build a foundation, make inroads with this set of customers.
Yeah.
Or we want to stay at the MNC level, you know. Yeah. That's it.
That's great. So thank you so much for this, Greg. It just gives us a little bit of an idea about what it means about sales. I'm just going to stop recording right now.
Sure.
All right. I'm talking to Delphine Dirks, who is a sales executive working for a very interesting startup in, well, not necessarily a startup in the world, but it's pretty well known. But in the interests of what we're going to be discussing, Delphine, I'm more interested in understanding your time that you've spent in Asia right now, specifically in a sales function as a sales executive. So essentially, I look forward to discussing with you some of the challenges that you've faced, things that you've seen, observed in the domain of sales there. So, but first of all, tell us a little bit more about your journey about sales from when you were actually there in Europe to sales in Asia.
Sales is quite different in Europe than in Asia.
Yeah.
And I can experience that and give some examples.
Yeah.
It's quite exciting to go through that learning phase, especially because you need to go through it yourself, but you also meet people along the way that make it very clear to you how to adapt your style.
Yeah.
So in Belgium, it's more, let's say, also the company I worked for, of course, was more established. So relationships have already been established and are already long-term.
Yeah.
So you really speak more about facts and getting things done. And you say quite business in terms of your relationship. While in Asia, I can feel, of course, cannot generalize, just a little bit maybe. Relationship is quite important. So you really need to work that relationship because relationships are less established here. It's also less established companies that I worked for that became very established in a very short period of time. 2-3 years later, you build very strong bases with the same type of people, but you just need to start from scratch and prove yourself slightly stronger. So working relationship is very different across the globe.
I like it because one of the things that you talk about is when you talked about established market in Belgium, but you were actually working for an American headquartered multinational in Belgium. And then from there, for the same organization, you decided to move all the way. So you've actually seen working for an American company and how you had to adapt their strategies to Belgium and the European way of working. And then you had that, and then you had to go back and maybe relearn parts of how to build relationships. So that is something that I find it very, very fascinating. So when you went all the way, so when your organization before decided to take you all the way to Singapore first, right? I'm not talking about the American fast mover consumer goods CPG company that actually took you there. Did they provide you specific training about how to deal with building relationships and doing sales in a new continent and a new way of working when you moved to Singapore for the first time?
I think maybe let's clarify a little bit how this happened. So it was more an ask from my side rather than the company bringing me there.
Sure.
So that's where also things get a bit different, I feel, in terms of training and in terms of getting the support. Of course, on the other hand, the company was super supportive and I received quite, let's say, I received a good community and support, like they created a community for me or they tried to connect me with people in Asia. So I was the one deciding I wanted to move to Asia. So that's where you start a little bit from scratch. But the network and the support you get from people you meet from that company across the region is super strong, and you actually learn a lot from them, from connecting with them, and it is it is by asking the right question that you get the right training. On the other hand, I can say that when I left Belgium, yes, of course, I had different conversations organized by HR, highlighting that there are some difference in culture. Of course, they were very well aware that this is what I was looking for. So that's that's how it actually happened. But I feel I got trained and learned the most from the network that I built by moving over. Also spoke to people within Mars, Belgium, that had, let's say, already traveled, already changed cultures, and that's where I associate got my training from.
I love this. Essentially, you're talking about a person who voluntarily asked to move to a new place. So they built you a network, but in terms of sales skills necessary. So when you said it is more about building relationships in Asia, is that something that was part of any kind of training program that they created, or is it something that you learned by yourself once you were there, out there? You know what I mean? Specific sales skills necessary for you to be successful in a new place, especially Asia Pacific, which does not have a very strong history, which did not have a very strong history of having sales as being something very professional, right? And in terms of being trained and stuff like that.
So I think you learn along the way. I think sales is quite a thing that you can feel a little bit. You immediately feel if your sales is not going well and if your counterpart is not reacting the way you want him or her to react. So it's a very reactional business. So that's where I learned quite a lot along the way. By coming here, building a local network and finding out how to make effective sales.
Wonderful. So when you give the example of when you started setting up a kind of a more professional outfit in the company that you were working for, and that's, you continue to do it for other companies right now. Now, one of the biggest issues that when you build up a team is talent, right? Is the need for sales talent. Now, where do you look for, if you were there in Singapore, for good sales talent?
So at that moment, of course, I needed to start off with the talent that was already available. But yes, I agree, you need to expand your team at some point. So I would, in the situation at the more established company Mars, there was a good network of, let's say, distributors and recruiters that would support us, give us the right sales talent, and that would help us with conversations or connect us with some people for certain coffee chats and etc. Yeah.
But it is not that you would go to universities, like, say, for example, the place where we got to meet each other was at a business school, where there was some, at least, movement towards bringing sales into the curriculum, right? Whereas, so when you were there, and to this day, do you find that if you go in, that you can actually work with universities that is training sales talent, or it's still very, very raw and you have to rely on taking students and then training them yourself?
So I think I can answer this question in two pieces. So I think back at the established company Mars, the profiles that I needed were not really coming from university. So they were sales reps that had been doing the role since a long time. So that was one talent that I needed. On the other hand, if I then needed more senior key account managers, they also didn't have to be fresh grads. So that's where I didn't come in contact with universities. On the other hand, right now in my current role and my previous role at Alibaba, I actually feel that we are engaging actively to connect with students. And there are several programs organized here by the government to connect or to make it attractive for companies to hire fresh grads. I find that a very good initiative. So there are some requirements, right? So you need to have been graduated in 2020 or 2019, limited working experience. And that's where then the government comes in with some support that connects bigger companies with the right universities. And yeah, that's how I have hired at Alibaba at least 3 fresh grads through that program, and up to now it's working very well.
Right. But you're talking still of grad programs in general, right? You're not necessarily talking about people trained in sales. You still will take them and train them yourself. So it's not that sales education is something, at least not in most of the universities that you haven't had a chance to interact with, or at least your team has had. So it's not that sales is something that is there in their mindset. They're thinking about graduates in general, but not sales graduates. Right? That's great. So let's now, the other thing is that you bring people on board, so you need to train them, right? So when you look at training, do you look at local universities as a way of providing training for your existing people? So, or is it still in-house where you build your own training program yourself, or you work with consultants?
Maybe I'll also give 2 parts of an answer. So maybe I look at myself first, and then I can look at how I train my people. So how I look at myself is I've received quite a lot of good training back in the established company Mars. There is like some external companies such as Krauthammer are quite famous in sales, and I'm really happy because for me that really helped to turn around my way of negotiating with established retailers back in Belgium. So that has really helped. Of course, I do know that working with external companies like that are quite expensive, but I do appreciate that Mars has been able to give that to us. Of course, there was always internal training at Mars as well. So Mars is known to be a very good sales driven FMCG company. So there's very good sales talents there. And of course, on a side note, I learned a lot from people being around the business for over 20 to 25 years, right? So that's not really part of the training program you're talking about, but it's on the day-to-day that you learn a lot as well. So that's a little bit about myself. Of course, I always took back my sales notes from business school, to be honest. I think there were some good business games that I could then look at, and I'm still using the terms or so that I can define better in which step of a negotiation that I'm. And I'm still, as a manager, and then to go to my second part of the reply, as a manager, I'm still using this type of terms and created my own negotiation training. Based on what I know, based on my Krauthammer book, based on my business school notes as well. I created I think 40-pager training from like an hour and a half, and I would pass it all over 2-3 sessions with the juniors. I'm doing that quite regularly. So that's where I get quite involved there. I think as a salesperson, you do things naturally, but if you start thinking about it, actually there is really a very organized way of doing negotiations, and it really helps in managing emotions sometimes, and that's really nice as well for fresh grads.
Fantastic. So now one of the things that people sometimes think about is you have Asia, but just like Europe is not Europe, Belgium is separate, France is separate, you have all the different countries that are separate, right? So tell me a little bit more about your experience when you realized that Singapore is not the rest of Asia. So I'm sure you knew it, but going in there and doing business in Singapore is quite different from doing business in Malaysia. You're talking about doing business in the Philippines. So essentially, tell me a little bit more about what are some of the learnings that you've had from doing business there, the talents. You see what I mean? Are the talents the same in different countries? You see, is there variance in the talent? You see what I mean? Some of your thoughts on that one. Huh?
So I feel that a local connect is always really important. So for me, sales is still a very local job. And I have experienced that when I moved from Belgium to Singapore, it was not easy because it is a bit strange to see a Belgian selling chocolates to the retailers when actually it's quite of a Singaporean way of dealing with doing a transaction in sales. So one of the things that I see is before we can maybe move to level of experience in different countries is the fact that localization is really important. So as much as sometimes we think, we can bring our best salesperson in that country, I still feel that having a more junior or less experienced salesperson with the local from local is always better than just bringing in like me into Singapore. It was a great experience for myself, but it always takes longer for the company to get to that transaction.
But of course, you were selling chocolate. So who better to sell a chocolate than a Belgian to sell chocolate, right? So I can imagine that at least that was the thought process that they had. No, but you say that's very interesting. And now as a leader, when you look at, because now in your current job, you have to set up teams in many countries in Asia, right? So when that happens, what has been your learning in terms of what are some best practices about recruiting people in different countries? Because the education system is not the same. You can make an argument that in some parts of the West, that at least education system taking away the language might be equally good, whereas it could be different. So yeah, I do not know much. So tell me a little bit more about your experience with the different universities and the education systems in terms of recruiting talent. Yeah, you're muted, Delphine. Yes, sir.
I'll be very honest, like at the moment where I'm looking at my sales talents is mostly people with here and there a little bit of experience or an internship. Sure. So I think in countries such as Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, even Thailand, you can see fresh grads that already have internship knowledge. Yeah. So that's where I can define better if they are more into marketing and creative and if they're very keen to drive sales. So if they have a key account manager job somewhere as an intern, can be an FMCG company, can even be at a retailer, can be on an e-commerce platform. That's where I define that they are keen and in a way have the right mindset to drive sales rather than marketing or campaigns. So that's how I look and find them a little bit looking at their CV. I do not know per country, I mean, maybe to reply your question, I do not know per country which university has good sales training or not. So that's mostly, I do look at the type of university they're from. Some are good universities, some are maybe a bit less good, but are still very good people in terms of sales. So I guess from sales, you don't have to have an engineer background, right? So an engineer background or a very strong, let's say, master's would not mean you are a good or bad salesperson. So I would always try to look for some internship, or even in the interviews, I would look at some sales experience, even if it's in a coffee shop. I feel that's a very good indication rather than looking at university or what they have achieved in terms of school, at school.
And now you're scaling up a team during COVID. How has that kind of looked at your recruiting process? So you talk about coffee shops, right? So are you doing virtual coffees right now? So you're having virtual coffees with people, let's say, for example, in Vietnam, in Laos, or you know what I mean? So you even talked about Myanmar, which I think is very interesting. So you talked about Myanmar and essentially all those kind of things. So how has COVID changed the way you are recruiting talents, training them as well?
We're all doing it virtually, and we do realize that it works actually. Yeah. So I tried to go, if it's in Singapore, we are allowed to go out. So that's what I try to still have a coffee. But honestly, I do stick to a whole process of 95% of Zoom calls.
So, and you find that it's not necessarily affected that on the other side as well, that technology has not been a hindrance to recruiting good talents, right?
I don't feel so, especially for the roles that I'm really well aware of what I need. Yeah. It is more difficult for roles that are newly created and you want to go through certain business cases and look and feel. So, but they are not so much linked to sales. Newly created roles are slightly more in campaigns in certain aspects of marketing. But for me, in terms of sales, I do know quite well which type of questions to ask and find out if it's the right fit or not.
Good. two more questions and then we're done. I really do appreciate your time as well. So has COVID affected the way you are doing business? That is, you know what I mean? So I'm not talking about recruitment. I'm talking about business as usual, right? And you can talk about not just the current business, but also I'm sure you still have friends with your previous companies who you might talk to locally. Do you find that COVID has affected a lot in your region, the way you do business in your line of work?
Honestly, right now in the last years, I've been in e-commerce, so I do not feel that there is a big difference in terms of way of doing work. Of course, the pace and the density of work has become much higher. Of course, the demand has increased, so you need to, with the people you have on board, you need to do double, triple the work. That's another point. But in terms of recruiting or everything, not really.
Okay, very good. And the last question is, do you actually see, and this is a very loaded question, because when I was there, we're trying to set up something in sales at Belgium, while it was still new, but we had a lot of female students who are very interested in sales or doing very well in sales. I'll be very careful. Doing very well in sales. And they were also interested because it's just role play. They ended up in careers that's different. Do you see that happening in Asia as well? Or is it still very male dominated? When I used to be in India, where it was still seen as a domain for males, is sales still seen? Do you feel that is not the case right now?
I think the domain that I am in right now, which is of course coming from FMCG plus e-commerce groceries, it is a very good mix of male and female. And if it's more groceries, I would even have slightly more female sometimes.
Fantastic, yeah.
So I guess it's maybe because that's a specific sector. I guess sales in other sectors might be different. Yeah.
And and in terms of managers, do you actually also have middle managers? Do you actually have more females also coming up in terms of sales managers and sales leadership roles as well?
Yeah, actually, to be honest, even back in Belgium at Mars, there were, most of them were female. Actually, all my managers, like I think 70% of my managers had been female. And even the higher management was a very good mix. Then here, let's say in e-commerce, more in APAC, very, very good mix. I can see the startup scene still maybe being slightly more male. But still a very, very, very good mix, I feel. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's great. But when you mean e-commerce is the business, but you still have salespeople doing the business, right? So you still have to go sell the platforms, or for your particular company, you have to sell businesses to come work with you. So you still have female sales roles in the e-commerce business that you're in. Fantastic.
Sure. Yeah, I think I was leading the mother and baby category back at Alibaba. And that was, it was difficult to find males. And we had a very good female team.
Yeah, but that's interesting, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not that why can't you have males do that category? Makes sense.
Of course, no, and I agree.
Yeah, and for me, that's what is
had good
interesting.
males as well.
Yeah. For me, that's what I'm very curious to see, because I have this very preconceived notion, because I'm coming from India, which is still Asia, that certain role, for example, sales is still very heavily male dominated. Whereas if you come to the West, when I mean West, I'm talking about the US, we take a look at sales competitions. We have it heavily being very well represented by females who do fantastically. They almost win every time the sales competitions and everything else that are run at universities. So I was just curious to hear about your experience, especially when it comes to Asia and especially in your experience, how women are represented in the sales profession. So that's pretty much.
No, very strongly. Yeah. I can feel Southeast Asia in the e-commerce sales that I'm in right now, right? FMCG groceries. I think there is a good mix. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Delphine, thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy. You have to go take care of your team and do other stuff as well. So thank you so much for your time.